Hey, we're going to have a special edition around stupidity. There's stupidity abounding, but I've got a corral on that stupidity. I'm going to tell you all about it.
Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
That's me, and I'm here, and I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad you're there. I told you a moment ago before the opening that we were going to have a stupid story deal today, and no one that I know of have pulled more stupid tricks than I did. And I didn't wait for a long time. I did it pretty young. I got to jump on everybody. No, I was going to tell you that first home that I bought in Tennessee after moving from Texas, deciding that I was going to devote my life to the music industry, knocked around a little bit. I didn't have the hard times that some did, but I did. And gosh, I was pretty young. I guess I was maybe 23. Charlie Louvin of the Louvin Brothers, been on the Opry since Kitty Wells was a brownie. I mean, they had been there and done that. Charlie told me, he said, I've got a log house that I want to sell out in Fernvale, Tennessee. I'll tell you about where Fernvale is in a minute. And I said, really? Charlie, how much do you want for it? And he said, I'll take $12,500 for it. And I said, Charlie, I can handle that. It's a log house? See, I got enthusiastic over a log house because coming from southeast Texas, down far from the Gulf, that humidity played a factor, and it would rot things, so nobody built a log house. In Tennessee, a lot of houses were logs, and I really was taken with them. So it's my chance to get a log house in the country. So I buy it from Charlie, and we're having all kind of fun just out there with the snakes and the coons and the possums. I had to build a corral. And then I had to build not build, but get a run-in, or some of them call them loafing sheds, something to give my horse some shelter. And by the way, I snaked the saplings out of the woods off the mountain to build that round pen. Did it myself. And didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it. And now I've got to get somebody to build this thing. And I'm thinking, I went up to a little store about 5 miles away from me on the gravel road. I said, is there anybody that does building around here? He said, yeah, there's an old boy up in Kingville. Well, that tells me something. Kingville, about 5-6 miles up the road, and he's a carpenter. I said, okay, so I went up to Kingville, and every mailbox had King on it. I swear, I'm telling you the truth. Every mailbox had King on it, and that went on for maybe about 100 yards of houses, little shacks and what have you, but they did have King on the mailbox. So I found Robert King, and I found him back in a little shanty back there, and I said, Robert, I understand you do some carpentry work. He said, I do. And I said, well, I need a run-in built. I've got the lumber, and I've got the metal roof and everything, if you can put it on. He said, sure, I can build that thing. I said, well, show up there in the morning, and we'll just get started on it. And he showed up in the morning, and I said, would you like me to get you something to drink and bring it down here? And he said, no, I brought my own. He had a gallon clear glass jug, and I looked at it, and I didn't think anything about it. The guy loves water. That's fine with me. Well, he worked, and he worked, and he worked, and he drank water, and he drank water, and I think you know where I'm going with this. But nevertheless, he drank that whole darn jug of water. Well, when I went down there to check the job over, everything was catawampus. It was sitting at an angle to him after drinking a gallon of moonshine. It looked perfectly straight. Well, that was my first experience in stupidity in hiring someone. Now, here comes number 2. Same guy involved. I cannot believe this. Yeah, I can, because I done it. Yes, sir, I done it. He was looking over the property there. There was 23 acres. That was up and down. Creeks, springs, beautiful, beautiful. But if you ironed it or straightened it out, because of the only measure when they surveyed just straight angles, right? So they don't go up and down, up and down. Had they ironed that land, I'd probably had about, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 40 acres, about 40 acres. But the deed said 23, so we went with that. And he said, "Can I look around?" I said, "Well, sure, Robert, look around." And he looked around. He went he went in the back. He walked through the woods and came out, and he said, "Boy, you sure have got some good water here. These springs are just delivering so much water, and the creek is just flowing. You can see the bottom of it. It is absolutely beautiful." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Well, what I was starting to say is I can make some mighty good whiskey back there." And I said, "You can what?" He said, "I can make some really good whiskey." I said, "You've made whiskey before?" He said, "Well, sure. I went to jail 3 times for it." That's like his proof that he made good whiskey. He went to jail, and he wore it like a badge. So I said, "Well, what's the deal on it?" He said, we can make a lot of money, and you've got the perfect place back there." And going through my mind was years before that, Robert Mitchum. Not many of you will remember this. You can look at him on YouTube or something. It was called Thunder Road. And he was a moonshiner with a 47 Ford that would really rock, and it was sitting low on the back because it was full of moonshine. Well, I heard that in my mind, Thunder Road, Robert Mitchum. This is going to be incredible. I'll be the king of whiskey in no time. Well, I asked Robert, I said, "Well, we're going to go halves, huh?" He said, "Yes, sir, we'll go halves. You buy all the material, all the makings for this good moonshine, and we'll split the profits 50-50. And I said, "Well, what's it going to take?" He said, "Well, now we're going to have so many pounds of corn in a sack, of course, and we're going to have so many pounds of sugar." And I said, "Boy, that's a lot of sugar." And he said, "You're going to have to go buy it, because if I go buy it, but the fact that they know I make whiskey, they'll know I'm going to be making whiskey again. I promised that old judge I was never going to make whiskey again." And so he went and he got that and put it in the basement. And I said, "Okay, we got plenty of sugar, we got plenty of corn." He said, "Now I'm going to have the cooker made." The cooker is where they start cooking all that mash and stuff to make it. And he said, "I'll have to come out here in the middle of the night. I got an old boy up in Franklin, Tennessee that's going to make it for me." And I said, "Okay, what time are you coming?" He said, "It'll be way dark because I got to sneak it out of there, because if they see this, they'll know that I'm off to making whiskey again." So I sat up till about midnight, and there was a creek you had to pass over a bridge to get into my property. And so he crossed my bridge. I saw him coming, and he was in total disguise. I mean, no one would ever know that he was hauling a cooker, because that cooker was 3 55-gallon barrels welded together, tied on top of an old Buick with the fenders a-flopping, and a tarp over about half of it. So obviously no one would ever suspect Robert would be having a cooker on top of his old Buick. I saw that, and I said, "Okay." So he wags it back up the hills where he's going to set the whole still up. Well, I go back to Music Row, and I'm telling a couple of my buddies, Al Cooley and a couple of those, and I said, "Hey, man, I'm going in the whiskey making business." He said, "Are you making whiskey?" I said, No, I'm not making whiskey. There's a guy going to make whiskey back up on the hill of my house and tap into one of those springs. Kilroy, you better not do that." I said, "I'm not making the whiskey." They said, "It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. It's on your property. You will go to jail, believe me, and for a while." I said, "Well, that's the last place I want to be." So the next morning, the old boy comes out there, old Robert, he came out. I said, "Robert, I got a deal for you." And he said, "What is it?" I said, "I've got, I think I had about $500 in it. I don't know. I think I do." And I said, "You take the sugar, you take the corn, you take the cooker, and get it all off of my property, and it's yours to set up anywhere you want, but not on my place." So that was stupid number one. Oh, Lord have mercy, but there's some stupid going on. That's what you... No, I can't say I was young and stupid. I was just stupid to think I'm going to make whiskey and go to the penitentiary. I've done some crazy things. One thing I did, I was at Mercury Records, and this local distributor down in Houston. Only 3 major labels, RCA, Columbia, and Capitol, had their own distribution. There were independent distributors for all other record companies. And the one in Houston, it distributed ours. So Bill Ham, good guy, he was their local promotion man, meaning that he would take all of these records. They might be distributing, gosh, maybe 40 or 50 different labels. So when I was in town, I was slipping maybe, $50, $100 or something to make sure that he worked on our records a little bit harder than he worked on somebody else. And through all that, we became pretty good friends. And he called me one day and he said, Kilroy, I've got a band that I want you to come down here and hear. They are absolutely incredible. I said, well, tell me about it, Bill. He said, well, it's a three-piece band. And I said, a three-piece band? Now remember, I'm country, and I'm used to fiddle, steel guitars, or what have you, and or maybe rock and roll from the 50s that I only heard about. I never did hear it, but people told me about rock and roll in the 50s. But I said, three-piece band. I said, Bill, you can't make it. You've got to add a couple of more pieces to the band. Like if you want to, I don't know if you have a steel guitar or not. You may want a steel guitar, maybe a piano, just something. A pedal would be good, Bill. And he said, no, I don't think I can do that. He said, but I wish you would reconsider and come down and listen to him. I said, Bill, my schedule is really, really tight right now, and I'm moving all over the country. So a little while later, he called and he said, hey, I got a record deal for my Is that the way he did it? Needless to say, you know who I turned down. Billy Gibbons and his red guitar. Yeah, yep, that's who I turned down. And it just was a crazy thing that I shouldn't have done it, but ZZ Top is who it turned out to be. I said, ZZ Top, that's the name of your band? Bill, first of all, you got three instruments, and it's called ZZ Top. And right now, I feel very stupid. Matter of fact, first time I heard their I felt very darn stupid. Oh, Lord have mercy, we're just really stupid. And another thing, too, I made so many dumb mistakes trying to be good. I had a banker, Clarence Reynolds, Third National Bank in Tennessee, right there in Nashville. Good guy, but he adored, well, he was almost a groupie. He loved the artists in country music. You go in his office, he's got gold records all over it where the artists that he's represented and taking care of the money or loaned them money, they would give him a replica of their gold record. He had them everywhere. And one of his dear friends, when the man was still alive, was a guy by the name of George Morgan. Had one big hit called Candy Kisses, and he was on the Grand Ole Opry. Oh, Lord, here comes Clarence Reynolds from the bank. He said, Kilroy, you know, you're a really good guy and a great customer, and we've become really good friends. I mean, he was spreading it on. He was spreading it on. As Marty Robbins would say, he was spreading that peanut butter. I never did figure out what that meant, but Marty said it all the time. But he said, there's a young girl. No, take that back. He didn't say young girl. He said, there's a lady that I would like for you to listen to, and I'd love if you would sign her, take her into the studio, cut a hit record on her. She's the daughter of my best friend. Well, his best friend, George Morgan, daughter, had to be talking about Laurie Morgan. And indeed he was. And I said, Clarence, she sings good. But in country music at that particular time, youth was not very important. And if you look at some of the old country artists, looks weren't very important either. I could be naming them off, but I don't want to throw rocks at anybody. It may come right back on me. Anyway, he wanted me to sign Laurie Morgan. And I said, Clarence, I would sign her, but can we wait a couple of years till she gets a little maturity? She's a little young now. And he said, well, you're missing the boat, Kilroy. I said, I probably am, but I feel like my label is not, it was Playboy Records. I was the president of Playboy and started Mickey Gilley there. We had 4 or 5 acts that were doing pretty good. Gilley was the big one, of course. And I just didn't have room to promote another artist, truthfully. And I thought the lady was young. She was about 15, I think, at the time. She was on the Grand Ole Opry. Anyway, I passed on Laurie Morgan. Another stupid three. Stupid three was something else. Now comes the big stupid. It makes me laugh. And if I feel embarrassed and I show it, heck, give me a break. Anybody stupid as I was speaking back in the, I don't know the date, probably around 1980 or something, at the NORM convention, National Association of Record Manufacturers. Each year they held it at a different place. Well, I was the speaker on promotion, production, and sales of country music, as we try to tell the people how we're doing and how you should be doing. You know the thing when you're talking about something. So I was in New Orleans. Now, the company always provided a limo for me for transportation when I would travel to different towns, and this was nothing different. I had a limo there. Well, the convention lasted for 2-3 days, I don't know, but I had a night that was nothing going on, and also had a good friend named Dominic Rumor, and he ran, perhaps owned, I think he was just a manager of a Cadillac dealership there. And I called him. I said, let's go to dinner tonight, Dominic. You free? He said, why, heck yeah. Love to eat some crawfish with you. I said, I can eat crawfish. Let's go. I'll pick you up. Well, I went out to his house, picked him up in that big silver limousine. And I was attached to silver. And he said, Kilroy, you didn't have to rent a limo. He said, I've got two at the dealership. And he said, I can sell one to you, right? I said, oh, don't worry, Dominic. The company pays for the limo. I'm not paying for it. And we went on to dinner, and we're having dinner, and we're having drinks. And when I say drinks, I say drinks plural. And I got into some tequila. And when I drank tequila, I would get very, very influential. I would get very, very prosperous. I mean, I was a whole nother man. I was Superman. And I had a flight the next morning on a Douglas DC-9. Douglas is the manufacturer, not the airlines. Well, the DC-9s were pretty new, like they'd been out for about a year, and they were falling out of the air. Boom, boom, there's DC-9 falling. You could almost see them. And I didn't want to get on that DC-9 in the morning with thunderstorms in New Orleans, at Gulf Coast thunderstorms. So I thought about those limos. I said, Dominic, you got a couple of limos at the dealership. They're for sale, I assume. He said, you bet. I'll make you a good deal on one. I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I don't want to fly back. Send one to the hotel in the morning. By golly, I'll buy it and I'll drive it back to Nashville. Because you got to have a chauffeur if you're going to have a limo. Well, sure enough, next morning in my room, phone rings, and it was a guy downstairs said, Mr. Kilroy, I've got your limo down here. And I thought, oh, God, I've got to go down and buy a limo. What am I going to do with a limo? I don't have a chauffeur. Well, I wasn't going to embarrass my friend. So I went down, wrote the guy a check, bought the limo, and drove it back to Nashville. Didn't have to get on that plane in all that stormy weather. Drove it back to Nashville, and all the way I'm driving back, I said, oh, God, what are my friends are going to say? Oh, God, what are they going to say? I'm driving a limo, and I'm a pickup truck guy, Well, I had a big red barn, and I put it in the barn. I said, I'll just keep it hidden. And a few of my friends knew about it, and we'd have some things that I mentioned him earlier. Al Cooley was one guy that was a good friend of mine. He was a song plugger. Roy Burke, one of the greatest songwriters that Nashville ever had. He was another buddy, and several guys would come out. And Tennessee, if you haven't been there, is full of little black winding trail roads that just meander around the hills, And we'd drive around on those little back roads, and we'd had an 8-tracks with 50 rock and roll on it, and we'd have a few beers, and we'd laugh, and we'd drive that limo, where no one could see us, of course. And then Al Cooley running his mouth, about Kilroy with a limo. And like the one that I had in New Orleans, this happened also to be silver, gray or something. That booger looked so long to me that you needed hinges to turn a corner. But anyway, we'd ride around, and one day the phone rang, and it was Joel Wilburn, but I was not in the house. I was out in the pasture mowing on my tractor. So they came and got me, said, Doyle Wilburn is on the phone. They had wanted that limo. And he said, I want that limo for Teddy and I to travel in. And I said, well, sure, I'll make the price right for you. I've got it stored up in the barn. I haven't even started it, maybe in a month or two. And if there's a problem, I'll put a new battery in it. But I want you to take it and drive it for a while to make sure it's reliable, because I haven't driven it in a long time. I don't want you and Teddy off there stranded on the road. And he said, okay, we'll come pick it up. And he came and picked it up. Well, 4 or 5 days later, it's a Saturday. It's time for the Grand Ole Opry, direct from Nashville, Tennessee. And Doyle called. I was on the tractor again. And he said, we're not going to be able to buy this car. I said, really? Why not? He said, well, it stopped on Briley Parkway as we were coming back from the Grand Ole Opry in the Opry House. I said, well, by all means, get that thing back here. I don't want you and Teddy going on the road in it. He said, well, I'm going to take it by my service station. He had a Gulf service station on Melrose, yes. And he called back in a couple hours. I'm on the tractor again. I got to get off the tractor and go back. And he was laughing his butt off. And I said, what are you laughing about? He said, you weren't kidding about not driving that limousine. And I said, no, I haven't driven it. What are you talking about? He said the reason it wouldn't run and it quit on us is the mice had somehow squeezed in there and built a huge nest in the air cleaner. And he said, my mechanic here took it off, cleaned it out, is running like a charm. Teddy and I want that limo. I said, oh, thank you, God. Rid of the limo. Never drink tequila, and you get so prosperous that you buy a long silver limo. But I did, and I regretted every minute of it. But I want to tell you something I don't regret. I don't regret using Total Feeds product. You know, you've heard me talk about them. Elizabeth and I went on it, we were trying to think the other day, 16 years ago, maybe 17, I don't know, a long time ago. We met Mr. Harry Anderson. Dr. Anderson has super knowledge of what's good for animals and what's good also for people. He's got Total Equine, which our horses have been on it ever since the day I met Dr. Anderson, and Total Bovine. I've told you before that some of those bulls are, you see in the PBR and the Pro Rodeo, were on that program to build their muscles up, and they're really good. And I watch them buck, I'm saying, wow, Dr. Anderson has come up with another formula. And also, he's got, I'm going to make this real quick, Total Canine. I love it. Now, most of you know, because I've talked about it a lot, that we have too many Aussies. Not too many Aussies. Too many, meaning little bitty Australian Shepherds. They're not that little bitty, but they call them mini Aussies, and they'll be raised on that food. So I want you to go to the website of Total Feeds and look it up. Study on it, what he's got on there, a lot of information and a lot of good things. And it's time for me to kind of saddle up and drift, but go to the website, totalfeed.com. This is Kilroy saying take care of yourself, and God bless each and every one of you. And subscribe. Yes, help us build this thing. I thank you, and I say good night to you or good day to you, wherever you may be. Walk in the will of Jesus.